Hello, everyone. My name is Sierra Carter, and I'm going to share a little bit about what I have learned with while taking this Black History course with my little brother, and his name is
Declan Carter, and I'm excited to learn what my sister's been learning.
Okay. So we're going to start with an icebreaker. I'm gonna ask you two questions. Okay. The first question is, what is the importance of knowing about Black history?
To know where you come from and what your ancestors went through to bring you here.
Okay. And if you could meet any Black historical figure, who would it be?
Malcolm X,
Why?
because he was more out there and like ongoing and ready to do what he had to do instead of just doing speeches and getting locked up.
Is that because you're violent?
No.
Okay. Continue. So my first subject that I will be teaching you about is the history of slavery. So, when did slavery start? What century?
1600s.
The 16th century?
Yeah.
Okay. And who were the enslaved? So who was enslaved?
Blacks.
And who was the enslaver?
Whites.
Were they the first enslavers?
Yes.
Do you know you're wrong?
No.
So actually, we were taught in school that slavery didn't exist until the 1700s, which is correct, but that's under the British, which were the whites back then. But we were actually enslaved in the 1600s. And can you guess by who? If it's not whites, what other ethnicity do you think would enslave us?
Indians.
No, good guess. Latinos.
How?
Okay. So, we were enslaved under the 16th century, and we were enslaved under the British, not under the British, the Spanish crown. So the Spanish crown enslaved us before the British crown. And it was all because of one man. Do you know who that man is?
No.
Bartholomew de las Casas. If you ever hear that name, remember. If you ever hear anyone with the last name de las Casas, watch out. Okay. So, basically, Latinos were enslaving other Latinos.
But why would they do that if they were just going to get enslaved? Because they got enslaved too, just like us.
Same way that the whites did it. They needed somebody to help them sharecrop and for other things. So back then, they were called Tainos. So other Latino Americans were enslaving these Tainos. And then Bartholomew de las Casas said, hey, let's not enslave these Latinos. We can enslave Africans. You want to know why we can enslave Africans? Why do you think he chose to enslave Africans instead of Latinos?
They were already doing good labor on their own country, and they knew nothing about the new country they were going to.
That definitely could have been part of it, but his number one reason for enslaving African Americans, well, Africans at that time, was because they could survive sicknesses. Do you see how that bias plays out into the world now?
Yeah, because everybody gets sick now.
No. Think about it. When you go to the doctor, how do you feel?
Scared.
Why?
Not gonna get sick. Or they're gonna diagnose me with something that can stop me from doing what I like to do.
Okay. And I think that a lot of the misdiagnoses, or when people are ignored when they have pain, is because we have been given this persona that we can endure so much. So basically, Bartholomew de las Casas said, well, they can endure smallpox. They can endure any cold or flu that they get. Why? Because they're strong. They'll survive.
first, Africa wasn't cold, so you could not get a cold. And smallpox came from the European part of the country.
Yeah, and guess what? We could survive that. That's what was said. Any sickness, we could survive it.
Sounds biased.
Very biased. So, another thing is that who's Christopher Columbus?
The person that allegedly that did not step one foot on America. They said found America.
Okay. So you know he didn't come to America.
No.
So where did he go? Do you know where he actually stepped foot at?
Europe.
No. Well, yeah, but where did he say was America? What did everyone thinks was America where he actually was?
England.
The Bahamas.
There you go. Also.
And we have a whole holiday and textbooks dedicated to him.
That's why we call it Indigenous People Day, not Christopher Columbus Day.
Right. Absolutely right. So the next topic I'm going to... Do you have any questions about that topic?
So confusing on the Latino part.
What do you mean?
Why would they do that? And then I'm guessing they feel really dumb when they got enslaved with the African American.
They might have. You never truly know. But like I said, they felt like at that time that the Taínos should not be enslaved, and instead the Africans were more equipped to handle it. So, have you ever heard of something called the critical race theory?
Sounds confusing.
Is that a yes or a no?
No.
So the critical race theory is basically when you have textbooks and everything, you're going to include a curriculum for Black history. So you're going to teach not just Black people, but all students about the history of African Americans.
Yeah.
That's critical race theory, which is being fought because many say it is a systematic racism.
What you mean by that?
Meaning that these courses are going to cause people to it's going to basically cause an uproar. They don't feel like African Americans should have to have a history course because it's only going to make more conflict, basically.
The way I see it is you don't teach African Americans, you don't teach everybody in the room Black history, and then they go find out about it. Then that's going to bring an uproar because they find out they've been lied to their whole entire life.
Right. That could definitely bring an uproar. But they don't see it like this because then they'll have to address some things. Textbooks are going to have to be rewritten because, as you know, we've been lied to in textbooks.
Most of the time.
So they're trying to stop this from happening. The key with achieving, with having critical race theory incorporated is for racial equality and to build a multiracial democracy. We learn about the British history. We learn some aspect of Indian history, Native American history. Mm-hmm. We learn about some aspects of Latino history. But when it comes to us, what do we learn?
Just the stuff you basically already know or basically gonna find out. You just take a walk down DC.
Right. We get you were slaves, you were beaten, you were killed, you were raped. Now we're going to... Then we gave you your freedom. Then we segregated you. Then we did Jim Crow laws. And then, you have some great people that came along too, like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. Oh, and then, Harriet Tubman escaped. That's it. Who wants to keep hearing about that?
Most of all of them died by some white person.
True there, too. Now, do you have any questions about critical race theory? Would you want to incorporate it in your school? Why?
Because I feel like that's unfair to one's race. And that I teach, like, the other teachers teach British, Native American, Latino history.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just wouldn't teach the others, like, their black history, like Malcolm X, MLK, Rosa Parks, etc. That would not be fair to them or me.
Okay. Moving forward, I'm going to discuss some policing roots for you. So, the foundation of what the whole police department came from. Do you know what's the foundation of policing?
Harassing black people.
We're not going to say that. But it started with slavery times. And they were sent
to seek out runaway slaves.
Yes. Okay, you know that. All right. Yes. Okay. So, we have always had a resistant relationship with the police. So now they are bringing up some issues and they're thinking about defunding the police. Do you know what defunding the police means? What does it mean?
Take away, like, how high their budget is.
Yes, so taking away some of those budgets, and instead we can use it for housing, education, mental health services, hospitals, healthcare. How would you feel about defunding the police? Would you choose to defund or would you choose not to defund? Think about it. Well, actually, before I ask you that question, do you feel like having police in the world is necessary?
Yes, because it's not all police officers that are doing wrong to black people or to innocent people.
Right. Okay, good. Now, would you choose to defund the police? Yes or no?
Yes.
Why?
Because that means I can help kids around our area and our neighborhood to get better education, better housing. Like, not all people can live in a big townhouse in a good neighborhood. Like, some of my friends live in bad neighborhoods, and they talk about the stuff they see, and there's nothing I can really do about it because I live in a nice suburban area. Like, so I think if they would defund police, just like, not like a lot where they have to do budget cuts and stuff like that, and their cars wouldn't work as good. I'm saying, like, defund them just a little bit where they could still do their job, but still where we can help out the community.
Okay. Anything else about policing routes that you have questions about before I move on to my last and final topic? Ask now or forever hold your peace.
If police were, like, originally for runaway slaves, why are police, knowing that there's no more slaves, knowing, like, the people that put that in place, we're not doing it no more, still is brutal to people of color. I'm not saying just blacks, I'm saying Latinos, Indians, Asians, all that.
I feel like police officers are still brutal to people of color because they have already been taught that they were a threat. So during slavery times, they were taught to hunt and kill. Most of the times, they didn't have to bring the enslaved back.
Yeah,
they were able to kill them.
The bounty would say dead or alive.
Right.
Or just dead.
So they could kill them and bring them back and still collect money for them. So they had already been taught to kill because we're a threat. So then it moved, we got free. So you couldn't kill because of that. So then it got more brutal because, you have whites stay over here, blacks stay over here. If you come over here, I'm still seeing you as that threat. And I feel like that still carries through. We're seen as a threat. So I teach you when you interact with police officers.
Nice. Short, slow.
Right. No sudden movements. Announce what you're doing. Always remain calm even if you're mad. Be clear. Don't be rambling your words. Don't be touching all types of stuff. Keep your hands clear where they can see them. Because of that whole seen as a threat situation. And this is where I wanted to end it at. Do you know that we had some white allies?
Mm-hmm.
Some white people that really, really helped us.
Not Pacific, but I know white people did help. So
Have you ever heard of any specific names?
No.
Quakers. You ever heard of them?
No.
You don't even think of oatmeal?
That's the only thing I think about.
So it's not them Quakers. But the Quakers was founded in 1647. And they basically bought slaves and either sold them to people that were free and didn't do slavery so that they would then become free, or when things cracked down on them and they were no longer able to sell them because the government got a hold of what they were doing and people in charge was, like, you're selling these people and now they're free, they taught them how to read and write and just let them be. So sometimes you would be a slave of a Quaker, but you wouldn't be doing slave work. They did a trust system. And they held nearly 350 slaves in that trust system.
I've heard that name before.
Okay.
Levi Coffin.
Mm-hmm. He was a Quaker abolitionist. They guided slaves on the path to freedom as a leader of the Underground Railroad, born about 4 miles north.
So yeah, he was more
tremendously helpful in getting these slaves to freedom. Next one I have is John Brown, which to me, he is a hero. However, might not be to everybody, and here is why. Mr. Brown had 3 sons.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his 3 sons, including himself, they basically fought for the freedom of slaves. While fighting for the freedom of slaves, all 3 of them ended up dying.
Makes sense.
Because they
were abolitionists.
Yes.
Helping black people.
Sorry, he had 5 sons in all, and 3 of them died. Yes, 3 of them died.
Makes sense.
Because he went out and basically he killed people that were enslaving blacks and set their slaves free.
So basically KKK for white people.
Yes. And his 3 sons and him. No, his 2 sons and him died. So 3 people altogether.
But that them real scared.
So basically, he would come up to you and shoot you because you were a slave owner. Take it and tell your slave that they are now free. He didn't believe in slaves.
Kind of like UCS Grant. He didn't believe in slaves.
I don't have much to say about him. So they were killed during the Harper Ferry raid. So, late in the afternoon of October 17th, 1859, President James Buchanan ordered a company of Marines under the command of Robert E. Lee to march into Harp's Ferry. The next morning, Lee attempted to get Brown to surrender, but he later refused, ordering the Marines under his command to attack. The military men stormed John Brown's fort, taking all of his abolition fighters and their captives alive. So he did all this work, helping freeing people.
Just to get killed.
Yes.
Oh.
So, on the morning of October 19th, 1859, the soldiers and his followers, 10 of his men were killed, including 3 of his sons. So yes, 3 of his sons was killed, and he was killed. He was executed in front. He was the first person executed for treason in the history of the United States. And this is a white man.
I'm not surprised he got caught by Robert E. Lee. He refused surrender, and that's what happens when you refuse from a white supremacist.
Right. Have you ever heard about Minister Reeb?
Never in my life.
This was another young gentleman, and he participated in a sit-in with African Americans. Basically, the sit-in was to say that basically black and white should be able to eat at one restaurant. So he sit in with the African Americans at an integrated restaurant. And once he left, he was beaten severely to the point where he needed to go to the hospital.
By whites or blacks? By whites or blacks?
By whites. By other white racist men. And at that time, he was in Selma. And the Selma facility for white people refused to treat him. The hospital for whites refused to treat him because he went and sat in with the black people. And unfortunately, the black people hospital was over capacity. So they chose to let him die because he chose to sit in for equality.
Dang.
This is not all of the white allies that we have had along the road to freedom and equality, but another one that I just want to talk about is Viola Lizzo. She was 39. She told her husband that she was going to leave after hearing Martin Luther King's speech in Selma when he said it was everybody's fight. So she decided to take on the duty and help transport African Americans from the riots to get them where they needed to be on time and pick them up and drop them back off. That's all she did, was pick them up and drop them back off.
She got killed.
Yes. And after she was killed, they went around and spread a lot of lies about her, saying that she cheated on her husband with black people, that's why they killed her, that she was on drugs, she was an unfit mother. This story, that she was a heroin addict, a member of the Communist Party, and she abandoned her children to have sexual relationships with African Americans. So they tarnished her name for doing a good deed. That just shows you how ugly racism can get. So now, learning everything that you have learned, how do you feel we're coming as a collective now? What changes still need to be made, and what changes have been made to benefit us?
We're better now because we're not trying to rip each other's heads off. Some people might not like us, some people don't. But everybody knows, most are like 80-95% of people know what to say to people and what not to say. Like no racial slurs, stuff like that. But what needs to change is when people get disrespectful and they say stereotypes to you.
Okay.
Without thinking what's going to impact, and then they expect to, if you say that to the wrong person, you don't get punched or beat or, get cussed at, because stereotypes, it's not fun and games.
Right. So what's the most important thing that you can take away from everything that you were just taught?
That to this day, police are still in their same roots that they have been in since the 17th century.
How is that going to affect you?
By knowing how to change or try to change
the police system? Okay. Well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you for allowing me to be your teacher today.